Hello and welcome to the Friday Show with CJ Wellerman, presented by Inside Arabia. I'm your host, CJ Wellerman. Thank you for joining us here today and every Friday for a breakdown of some of Inside Arabia's coverage and analysis on the MENA region. And make sure to subscribe to this channel so you never miss a single episode. Our coverage this Friday reveals how Saudi Arabia is deporting Uyghur Muslims to China, where they face certain persecution. We then look at how coverage of the war in Ukraine reveals Western media bias, and then finally we examine reasons why Washington DC's efforts to return Iran to the nuclear deal are likely to fail. Now let's get started. We start with my most recent article, which argues that deporting Uyghur migrants from the Middle East to China is the epitome of evil, given what we know to be true about the Chinese communist regime today. And what we know from hundreds of survivor testimonies is this: that at least 3 million Uyghurs have been detained in a network of concentration camps where they are subjected to unimaginable cruelties, including torture, forced abortions, forced separations, forced sterilizations, sexual assault, and worse. The Chinese government has declared it will show Uyghurs no mercy in its pursuit to eradicate their culture and religious beliefs. So given all of this, it's unconscionable that Saudi Arabia continues to deport Uyghur migrants to China at Beijing's behest. Just days ago, Saudi authorities transferred a Uyghur mother and her 13-year-old daughter to a deportation center in Riyadh, ahead of their planned deportation to China. A move that has triggered protests among Uyghur communities in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. Alarmingly, their planned deportation comes at the same time a new study shows China continues to grow and industrialize its criminal organ harvesting enterprise to satisfy local and international demand for organ transplantations. Researchers at Australian National University have unearthed evidence showing Chinese surgeons at state-run civilian and military hospitals are executing political prisoners by removing their hearts before they are clinically dead, which corroborates countless other studies that point to the systematic murder of Uyghur and other political prisoners for profit. For these reasons, Amnesty International has strongly condemned the Saudi government, saying forcibly returning Uyghurs to China, including children, where they face a horrific campaign of mass internment, persecution and torture, would be an outrageous violation of international law. Simply stated, Saudi Arabia must choose against being a willing participant in what now constitutes the worst persecution of a religious minority since the Holocaust. We shift now to Stasa Salakanin's article, in which he identifies blatant double standards, hypocrisy, and even vicious racism in the Western media's reporting of the war in Ukraine. And it doesn't seem to matter whether you turn on CNN, CBS News, or the BBC, you cannot avoid comments that openly favor the white race, the Christian religion, and the economic status of Ukrainian refugees, in contrast to people of Middle Eastern or North African descent. For example, a CBS News correspondent described Ukraine as a relatively civilized and relatively European country in comparison with Iraq and Afghanistan.
This isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
While an NBC correspondent drew clear racial distinctions between Syrians and Ukrainians.
Just to put it bluntly, these are not refugees from Syria, these are refugees from neighboring Ukraine. And that, quite frankly, is part of it. These are Christians, they're white. The
implication being that Syrian refugees are predominantly brown-skinned Muslims and therefore undeserved of the kind of empathy that has been granted to Ukrainians, which suggests these journalists and media organizations truly believe some lives matter more than others. This is deeply disturbing on so many levels, given the influence the media has over the way in which Western audiences see injustice, suffering, and conflict. Salakanin says the media should play a decisive role in living up to the universal values that are common to all people, regardless of their ethnic origin or socioeconomic background, because selective justice is injustice. We come now to Maysam Baravri's analysis on the Iran nuclear deal, which the Biden administration is trying to revitalize after former US President Donald Trump tore up the agreement in 2018. An effort that is likely doomed to fail, however, given Tehran's increasingly anti-Western path and forthcoming leadership succession, which is likely to make way for a predominantly hardline ruling elite to carry on the revolutionary torch. All of which, of course, makes rapprochement with the United States, or what Iranian hardliners called the Great Satan, all but an impossible task. Baravish also rightly points to Tehran's Look East strategy, which has seen the regime establish closer ties with Russia and China, therefore allowing it to generate revenues from oil exports in the face of Western sanctions. And with Russia's war against Ukraine displaying no signs of de-escalation, and American and European sanctions on Moscow starting to bite, Iran is more likely than ever to join ranks with the Kremlin in its maximum resistance policy against the West, which essentially leaves the Biden administration's hopes for a renewed denuclearization deal dead in the water. You can find all three of these articles and more on InsideArabia.com, and make sure to follow Inside Arabia on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe to his channel. Anyway, that's my time for today. This has been the Friday Show with CJ Wellerman. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week, same day and same channel.